I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
You say, what is the goal? You say the goal is that we have peace in the relationship and that we each know that we're loved. And if you can keep that goal in mind, then you're not worried about necessarily being heard. You're worried about us both walking away knowing that we love each other.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Thanks for listening. We're creating a radio program based on our podcast, and we're looking for questions from listeners about relationships. So if you have a question or if you'd like some advice about your relationship, give us a call and leave us a message. The number is 415-483-5112. We'll get right back to you, and hopefully we can include you in the show. Once again, that number is 415-483-5112. Now on to the show. Today's episode is about the paradoxes inherent to happy marriage. For example, perfection is imperfection, as it must be. And on the one hand, while our lives are all about ourselves because they're our lives, we all know that if we focus just on ourselves, we're probably not going to be very happy. Now, Angus and Samantha, our guests this week, are very much like every other couple out there. They love each other, and they have their challenges. What sets them apart is that they each consider it a privilege to do what it takes to support one another through those challenges. And that's much easier said than done. It's just an abstract, feel-good, mean-nothing statement until you get right down to having to actually change yourself in a fundamental way to help your partner, which is what these two are able to do as a regular practice. And they draw their strength from their faith and from their awareness of the paradox of marriage. We're picking up the interview at a point where Angus and Samantha are telling us about a process that they go through with one another every year on their anniversary. It's called the 5+5. With that, let's go to our interview with Angus and Samantha Nelson. So you have this method where you go through the 5 and the 5.
Yeah.
Break it out for me again, and then I've got some questions about how it goes.
So there, we sit down. Early on in the relationship, we did it a couple of times a year where we sat down and we just talked about, we each took a turn to talk about what are 5 things that the other person does that makes us feel loved and 5 things that makes us feel unloved.
Okay. And you were describing a specific example of the one that you had worked through this yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or was it the day before yesterday?
Yeah.
And it wasn't resolved, it sounded like to me.
Okay.
So tell me the details again.
Do you want to?
So one of your unloved this go round was that I'm always late, and it's something that I totally own. I am always late.
She grew up on an island. She's got some island tendencies.
Yeah, but you feel like disrespected if we are supposed to be somewhere at a certain time and I'm running late. Or in the instance of when we were coming here to Chicago, it was like you wanted to be on the road at 8:30 and then it was 9 before we left. And so those kinds of things make you feel
Well, and here's
unloved.
the thing. Like I know after 9 years of marriage, I know these things, right? So if I know we should, be leaving at 8:30, I'll say, hey, let's leave at 8. Then comes the questions. And she's like, why are we leaving at 8? I was like, well, I want to be there on time, da-da-da. And she's like, do you have an appointment we have to be at? Well, no, we don't. I just want to be there early so we can, enjoy, Chicago, get in early, grab dinner, be relaxed, and not feel rushed and have to just get the kids to bed as soon as we get there or get stuck in traffic, et cetera, et cetera. But those aren't really concrete. If I told her I have an appointment at, X time I have to be at, we have to, well then I know that she would be in a little bit more heightened awareness to be on time.
Would she?
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes?
I mean, sometimes, yeah.
Because, I mean, that was the issue. When you were first talking about the story, you were saying that that she's generally not on time.
Yeah.
And your response to that was,
Well,
well, I'm the one who manages all the details of our family, so cut me some slack.
right. Because when we were leaving for the trip to Chicago, which was just an example, he was like, I wanted to be on the road at 9. And I was like, that's great. It's not that I'm blasé laying on the couch.
I wanted to be on the road at 8:30.
Yeah, you want to be on the road at 8:30. But we left at 9. And then, but it's not like I'm eating popcorn on the couch, like, let me just finish this Netflix movie. It was like I was rushing around trying to get the person who's watching our dog all the information and make sure they knew where the lights were and all that stuff. And that took a little bit longer. So I was trying to understand how often he felt like this happens. Like, does he feel like it's happening a lot, or did it just happen in Chicago and it's like on the forefront of his mind? I was just trying to ask him some questions, so he started to be like, I'm feeling defensive right now.
I'm the wolf in the corner.
You're asking me a lot of questions, and I wish you would just say, I get it, and I'm sorry that makes you feel unloved. And I said, well, I do understand that, but I think that we have to, like, understand the bigger concept, which is, are you saying that I'm being insensitive to you, or are you saying that, like, what are you saying about this, like, this thing about being late? Because I don't know that you're understanding it from my perspective either. So that's where we started to, like, get tense, right? Because it was like, what in the process of doing 5 Loved Unloved, you want to have a realm of safety to be able to say, okay, this makes me feel unloved, and you don't want to feel like targeted after that, like someone's like, breaking you down and making you feel like bad for feeling that way.
Yeah, because like we were saying, in the perfect world, it would just, in the fantasy of the 5 loved and 5 unloved process, you would say the things that made you feel unloved, they would just get it,
right?
change.
Right.
Because that's easy.
Change
is easy. We're good, right?
Issue solved.
But of course it doesn't happen.
And
so,
by the way, like before the recorder kind of crapped out on us, it's also to iterate what we said before is like after 9 years, we've been so intentional to work through much deeper, uglier issues.
Yeah.
That now, like these little issues that we have, it's like a refinement.
Yeah.
It's not, our issues today are not the kinds of issues we had when we first started.
Yeah.
And so it can look really petty that we're having this discussion about being late, because this is something like every couple, I'm sure, wrestles with, right?
Yeah.
But for us, it's like we're trying to get our relationship to such a level of not only enjoyment and the fascination that we have for one another, like we just keep growing more and more love, the more we create this safety, because it helps us get to a place where we can contend with our own junk.
Yeah.
Right?
Your own personal junk,
Our own
which is
personal
really
stuff.
all that it ever is.
Yeah, right?
Anyway. Okay, now what makes me really curious, or what I become very curious about when you say that is, first of all, what were some of the old issues, which I want to get to in a minute. But I think what's really poignant about what you're saying is how this process operates. And so the specific example is a really good one, because you're in it's not the perfect fantasy where your partner's just going to change and they are going to get a little defensive. And then how do you deal with it? The way she deals with her feeling of defensiveness is by asking you questions to better understand it. Right?
Yeah.
Samantha?
And also, I think another important thing that we do is we talk about what we're feeling. So as we were sitting in the restaurant, my hands started to go, and he started to kind of like back up, and I was like, he's like, I can see what you're doing. I can see your legs shaking under the table, and it's like we kind of calling each other out on those signs, like, hey, I can see you're getting defensive. And I would say, I'm feeling really defensive right now. I think when you talk about those things and you can identify them, then they're not like monster emotions that take you off the rails.
This might be a little too meta, but does your defensiveness itself make him feel defensive?
I'm sure. Does it?
I think so. Well, it kind of, it points at a bruise, right? Or pokes at a bruise.
Yeah.
So I shared something, in confidence, in vulnerability, in transparency. And now you're going to turn back questions at me and your defensiveness that could imply, or I could receive that as, you're not understanding or valuing this thing.
Message.
And she's
that
being
I'm
critical of you,
right?
In
Yeah.
a subtle way.
And so it can make me feel like I thought this was the safety tree. I thought this was the safe place, or whatever, or whatever. Yeah, from great movie, old school. There is a level of vulnerability that in a really good and healthy marriage, I don't think most people get to that place. Because in the midst of that vulnerability and transparency that we have really been very intentional to create is beauty and peace and safety.
But you got to trudge through the weeds of being uncomfortable and angry and all of those emotions. And you have to be committed to not walking away from that just when the emotion comes up.
Which is when you want to walk away.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Okay. How do you set the container? Because now 9 years into this, having done this probably 30 times, you know that this process is going to happen. One of you is going to get defensive. That defensiveness is going to make the other one feel bruised. So how do you set the container in advance so that
You say, what is the goal?
Yeah.
You say the goal is that we have peace in the relationship and that we each know that we're loved. And if you can keep that goal in mind, then you're not worried about necessarily being heard. You're worried about us both walking away knowing that we love each other.
Yeah.
And like we were saying before, like both of us have been married before. We had our practice marriages, and we didn't do the best in those. And the human behavior is that we keep things inside. The last person we talk to about the issue is the actual partner that we have. We go talk with someone else. Like dudes, we're gonna go, gripe about it to our buddies in the locker room. Oh, she's this and this and this. And in so doing, what we don't realize is as we're venting, we're also making that partner more of a beast and creature that she's not.
You're creating a reality with those words in your community of friends and in your own mind.
And
Absolutely.
now your friends think she's a beast as well. And they're like, well, eventually things could get challenging. And they're like, why are you even staying with her? Everything you've told us, doesn't make me want to be with her. Why would you want? Those are the things that true, healthy, and whole relationships, those conversations are reserved exclusively for one another.
Yeah.
And I want my friends to look at our marriage and my wife as, holy cow, what have you guys done? This is beautiful. Like, I want my kids to look at our marriage and say, these two have been through the fire, and they are stronger and more in love than what most people would be in those same scenarios.
Well, that raises a whole new set of questions about how to be authentic with your friends and in your relationship that I want to tackle. But the reason you were giving that example was to illustrate how you create the container and have it be safe, right?
Yeah,
So,
and one thing I'll add to that too is we didn't do it alone. So we have a friend of ours, Bruce. He was a pastor, and he and I actually worked together on a nonprofit organization, and he had hired me and then later had given me the keys to the organization, so then I ran it. And we became really good friends during all of that. And his perspective on life and perspective on relationships, and he had some of the same issues that I had contended with my past, i.e. pornography issues and promiscuity type temptations and stuff like that. So he and I personally had really vulnerable, transparent conversations. When Sammy and I started, getting serious, I said, hey, Bruce, would you come and counsel us and help us as a third party work through these hard things?
Great.
And so we didn't just do it exclusively. We had an outside party who loved us and was safe for us as well.
Do you still work with him?
Actually,
We just did.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the key trait of a healthy relationship is when you get to those moments when you keep butting your head up against a wall and you're not making any progress on the issue, that you both go, okay, we need help. Like, we need a mediator. We need somebody to help us get past this. And so like just maybe a year ago or
Like
less than a year ago,
9 or 10 months ago.
Yeah.
we hit that rock and we were just like, we're not making any progress and we're just feeling more angry and we need to talk to somebody about it.
Well, okay. So put a period on the sentence of the process, the 5 and the 5.
Mm-hmm.
You create a safe container by having an intention to make the relationship peaceful. And so you've decided that you're going to work through these very uncomfortable conversations because that's the only route to get to that peaceful, kind of weightless place you talked about where you're fully transparent and vulnerable with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
she gets sexier every bit of confidence she gains in that safety.
right, and every bit of vulnerability you open up,
that
right?
is so
That's
true.
in my experience, holy guacamole.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now and then in the specific one where she was asking you questions to better understand, how did you get through the uncomfortableness in that moment?
You're talking about just this other night or in general?
Yeah, the
That's
other
the
night.
other night.
So the other night, I don't know if I've really completely brought that one in for a landing. I think it's an ongoing conversation because that's the beauty of these things is you don't just put the Band-Aid on it and we're good. It's now we've brought it into the open because if you don't talk about it, it'll fester.
Yeah.
And then you just grow resentful and angry and whatever. And then when you finally do talk about it, you're like, and again, it's something that is not, right?
Yeah.
So we've brought it out in the open. And so now she'll have a timer on her phone that says, this is about the time I should probably start wrapping up whatever I'm working on. We're leaving in 48 hours. I should probably start packing now instead of 48 minutes before we leave. Like, I'm being facetious.
You are.
But not altogether untrue. But that's how I feel sometimes. And so we'll have those ongoing conversations. Now, what I know about my wife is she wants me to feel loved.
Yeah.
And it's been 9 years of hardcore laboring for us to get to a place that I know she's got my back at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And she may have to work through some human quotients or qualities that we all have to get there.
Yeah.
But I know that she's got the guts that she'll drill down and find ways to brain hack, mind hack, emotion hack to arrive at a place that can help me feel safe, and vice versa, right?
So I guess the point of it is that you have those 5 loved, 5 unloved, but doesn't necessarily mean you walk away from the table with a pretty bow on it at the end of the conversation. It's obviously something that we're going to be talking about as we move forward, and trying to build understanding,
Yeah.
and try and get to a place where he's happy, I'm happy, because it's about a win-win.
So, yeah, okay. So it's
With
not
that.
it's not resolved here. What was the big one that you called your friend back in for a year ago? What was that?
Me traveling.
What was that?
Yeah, it was that me traveling. So I was at a conference, and I was emceeing this conference in Aruba, and there was a picture that was posted on social media, and there was a young lady that was giving me this big hug, right? In context, if she had been there or anyone else had been there, you'd be like, oh, that's so sweet, whatever, picture taken, no problem. But when your partner doesn't have context, and here's this picture that comes up on social media, the mind does what the mind does.
Yeah.
And it created some major conversations. And so when I got back, there was tension. And here we are, we've been married for 8+ years at that time, and we're trying to work through, and that created other conversations that sprung out from that. Like, have you looked at porn recently? What filters do you have? Like, are you trying to get around some of this stuff? Like, it just kept growing.
Yeah.
I think, too, it was more the deeper issue below that was when we first were building our relationship, we were really intentional about setting boundaries, things that make sure that we were being like guarding our heart and guarding our relationship. And if he's traveling, the idea was like he would travel with somebody that he wouldn't be like meeting alone with a woman for drinks. It's about appearances. It's about making sure you're not giving people the wrong idea. It's about not allowing a lot of opportunity for, if you're out and you're like completely wasted that night, that you're not going to do something stupid.
Was this because, Angus, you had a specific issue around promiscuity, or would you apply that, Samantha, in any marriage you were in?
I would apply that in any marriage that you're in, for sure. But I think we both had propensities. He had propensities towards addiction and having had a past of promiscuity. I have a propensity for mistrust because there's not been males in my life that have ever been faithful.
Has he cheated on you?
No.
But Angus, I guess you cheated on people in the past,
Yeah,
and she knew about that?
Yeah, my first marriage, I became a workaholic, and then I started coping with the pain with pornography and alcohol.
Yeah.
And those two combined, it took me to really dark places of cheating on my wife. And the degree of my own self-worth and self-hate, I never, it took me through 5 years of absolute hell to try and come out of all of that.
After the last divorce?
Yeah.
5 years of personal development work, hell?
Yeah. And so I, for 3 years, it was like getting counseling and reading. And then, and it wasn't an easy road because there were ups and downs the whole time. It was schizophrenia, Yeah. I'd still go to the bar and sing karaoke.
Wait, you don't mean real schizophrenia?
No, I mean that emotional, where am I at spiritual, where is it, like everything, right? And self-worth. And then finally I sold my house and moved to Huntsville, Alabama. There was an author that I had been reading, and he had like a little holistic approach to like a Bible school type of thing. And I'm like, I'm going to go sit under this guy and work on my heart. And while I was there, like, he challenged me on so much stuff that was just religious programming in my head from my past, and really helped me to understand this thing of grace, and that imperfection is perfection.
It's gorgeous.
And that beauty comes from brokenness. And so it started to restore my self-worth and who I was and what I was capable of. And at the same time, Samantha walks into the story. And
how did you guys meet?
She, MMA, mixed martial arts. We kind of knew each other. We'd seen each other. And then she walked into the cafe, and I was with a bunch of buddies of mine. And on the TV, she goes, "There's Matt Hughes and so-and-so, da-da-da." And, like, all the guys just kind of with their jaws dropped looked and stared at her like as a head just pivoted on their neck. Like, how do you even know this? You're a girl. You're not supposed to know this. And she's like, "Well, I watched the pay-per-view. I grew up in Hawaii. I watched it when it was illegal cage fights, blah, blah, blah." And so we had 2 weeks before the next pay-per-view. All my buddies are like, "Let's all go over to Samantha." Da-da. I didn't know anything about mixed martial arts, but I thought Samantha was kind of cute. And so I jumped on old Googler, and me and Google, we figured out what Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was all about. I got my terminology down. And
your index card of cheat sheet moves.
Right. And for the next several months, it was, once a month it was the pay-per-view, and then it was the Ultimate Fighter, was the reality show was on every week, and then American Idol. So a bunch of us guys would go over to her apartment, 2 or 3 times a week. And so as we got to know each other, we got to know each other as friends in these really, great groups of people that, when it's just the two of you, you can put on a mask and a facade. I got to know the real person because there was never like me drilling down. It's like, "I think you're adorable," and like it took several months because I didn't know if I was ready for a relationship. I'm in the midst of my stuff.
Yeah. Back to the story. So you're in the midst of your stuff. You meet her. Yeah. She's cute. It's a great connection. And
so I'm pulling the George Costanza. Do you remember that one episode in Seinfeld where Costanza does like the opposite of every natural impulse, and all of a sudden life just started working for him? And of course, at the end of the that episode, he blows it all up.
Yeah.
Every time like we got together, and I felt these inclinations of running away, of fear or defensiveness or not good enough, kind of imposter syndrome. Like if you really knew me, you wouldn't want to even talk to me. Like, if you knew my story, you'd know how filthy of a human being I might be to you.
Yeah.
And I did the opposite of that. And I just trusted, like, this seems like a very quality human being. Like, maybe there's grace in her heart too.
Yeah.
And I had to keep telling myself this stuff over and over again, because in those moments, I had opportunity to slip back into self-hate.
Always, right? That's an ongoing, that's the process of grace.
Yep.
That always potential.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in this process.
I got a little emotional there. Good memories.
I mean, in all reality, we're super combustible together, because he had those issues and I have the issues of trust.
Right.
And so, like, those are pretty flammable issues when you put them together.
Which is also why you're perfect for one another, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think the willingness and the openness to embrace that and to talk about that and to not run away and not be scared of that and to say, we're going to kind of jump into this together. I think that makes it a awesome fit.
Mm-hmm. So you'd been cheated on by every man, essentially, that you'd been with.
I haven't seen quality men. I have not seen quality men in a love relationship.
Well, by that you mean prior to Angus.
Yes, yeah.
Until I walked to the page.
And I'm curious, what would happen if you met a man who you really did think was, I guess the word is trustworthy in that regard, quality in your term, and that there was no concern, that you didn't think was at risk of cheating on you? Would you still want the same boundaries around travel?
Yeah, because I don't think it was my issue. You know, it's not the quality of Angus that made me need those. It was the creating of a safe space for me.
Yeah.
That had more to do with my issues, me feeling safe, than me saying, oh, you're kind of high risk. That's not what that was about. I feel like if you do it that way, that's more about control. It's more like I'm like the circus keeper trying to make sure he's like in line.
Keep the monkeys in the cage.
That's not at all what it's about. It's about saying, everything I've seen when a guy goes out and he travels, I've seen the guys who are married sitting in the bars late at night with the people, and they're totally flirting with every girl when their wife is at home. Like, that's what I see. So for me, that triggers something in me to say, okay, in order for me to be safe, feel safe, to feel open, to feel like I can be myself with you, I need you to do this for me.
And
right.
For me, the opportunity is not to feel caged, not to feel trained. It is my privilege to create an environment for her to feel safe.
God, that is beautiful.
You know, and so for me to put filters on stuff, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. I just want to Google this page, and for whatever reason, it's filtered. That's not a filtering page. But I'll go through that small inconvenience on my cell phone because I know that adult content's never going to get on this, you know, unless I want to get really, really crafty and hacky, which I'm not smart enough for most of that. I create this place so that my wife can perform at her utmost potential in life. And here's the beauty of it. I actually get to reap the benefits of that. Like, when my wife grows more in confidence, her beauty, her sexuality, her communication goes to new heights.
Well, that's it for part one of our interview with Angus and Samantha, folks. Thanks for listening. On Thursday's episode, we'll see how these two resolve a major dispute, and they also share with us their relationship to faith and their very touching views on parenting. Be sure to tune in for that. Now, I didn't mention much about Angus in the opener, but he's a very successful executive coach, and he speaks and writes extensively on the topic of self-awareness in business. And he also hosts a podcast called Up in Your Business. Great name, and it's also a lot of fun. You can find his podcast and his writings at his website, angusnelson.com. That's ANGUSNELSON.com. and I'll include that link in the show notes in case you didn't get it here. Now, don't forget to give us a call if you have any questions about relationships. Our number is 415-483-5112, and we would love to hear from you. If you liked what you heard on the show today, please subscribe to us on iTunes. It makes a big difference when you do that. And please also consider donating to our Patreon campaign. We're on a mission to crush shame, and every penny really helps at this point. You can find our campaign at patreon.com/together. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out via one of our platforms. Our website is www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both @together_show. Our phone number is 415-483-5112, or you can email me at host@together.guide. Our producer is Charlene Goto. Our web designer is Courtney Munna. Our art director and my one and only is Aubrey Pick. She's the whole reason, folks, and she's on the couch watching Mr. Robot. I'm about to join her. Thanks once again to my guests, Angus and Samantha. Guys, good times. Let's go get kicked out of another hotel. That's all for today, folks. See you next time.